Okay, good evening. We are ready to get started. Want to welcome everyone to the Planning Summit series session on visioning for the Sammamish Comprehensive Plan update. My name is Jeff Arango. I am with Framework and I am the project manager for the consulting team that's working with the city and the community on the comprehensive plan update. And so before we get going, I just want to introduce a couple of other team members that are here with us tonight. We have from the city, Kelly Hildy, Deputy Community Development Director, and Evan Fisher, Senior Management Analyst, who is also the project manager on the city's behalf. And also Ellen Southard and Marin Borg from Site Story. They're our partners on community engagement for this project. And they'll be here helping me facilitate the meeting this evening. Before we get into the presentation, I want to call attention to the blue bar that's on the screen for slido.com. After we get through the presentation, we're going to be doing some live polling exercises. And so if you go to slido.com on your phone or on the computer and type in that code, you'll get access to the site and be able to respond to polling questions and also be able to ask questions that we can respond to towards the end of the meeting. As we get to the end of the presentation, I'll also give some time to make sure everyone has a chance to join Slido. And for those of you that attended the meeting last week, the kickoff meeting for the Summit Series, we'll be doing a very similar set of exercises, but this time focused specifically on visioning. There'll also be opportunity for some Q&A. So if you have questions, feel free to also put them in the chat. And for those that would like to verbally ask a question or make a comment later, we can also allow for that to happen as well by raising your hand. We'll call on you and then we can unmute you and give you the floor to ask a question or make a comment. Okay, so this is the second in the 5-night events that we're having for the Planning Summit throughout November. The kickoff meeting was on November 3rd. That was a hybrid meeting. So we had about half of the attendees in the council chambers at City Hall and about half online. Thank you again to those that may have attended that. We do have a summary of input that was received at that meeting that we're working on compiling and will be shared on the project website, along with a recording of the event. So this session is focused on visioning and specifically updating the vision statement in the comprehensive plan. So we'd like to start by just sharing some of our thoughts on what a vision is and our experience working with communities on creating vision statements for a variety of types of projects. So the first thing about a vision statement is that it's intended to communicate community values and your identity. So it should be specific to Sammamish in this case, what you think is important and value for the future of your community. It should reflect community input, and the community has given a lot of input already on visioning as part of a specific community visioning project that the city undertook within the last year. And we will be building upon that project for the comprehensive plan update and using the input that was received to help us create a new vision statement for the plan. The vision statement should be aspirational, but it should also be grounded in plan realities. So it shouldn't necessarily include things that are not achievable, but at the same time, it should be highly aspirational and be something that we can achieve during the planning period. In this case, the vision is specific to the comprehensive plan, so it should be relevant to the topics that are included in the comprehensive plan. So things like land use and housing and transportation and parks and capital facilities. Some measure of those should be reflected in the vision statement. It should also include tangible elements that give it meaning. And one of the examples we'll show later was a community that used the concept of 10 big ideas to form the foundation of their vision statement. So you should be able to read the vision statement and kind of get a sense of what the priorities are within the plan itself. Vision statements are typically communicated as text, so a short paragraph or statement, but it can also be communicated with graphics, maps, videos, and other media. And we have some examples of different types of vision statements that we'll present later this evening. And then finally, in our experience, the development of a vision statement is both an art and a science. And so as part of the community visioning project, the city did a statistically valid survey, which provided a lot of really great background information, but there's also kind of an artistic approach in sort of working with the community to find something that people like and feel reflects the community's values and priorities for the comprehensive plan. So the community visioning project, as I said earlier, was a very major effort conducted by the city. It included a statistically valid survey as well as a number of other outreach activities. It resulted in a lengthy and detailed report that's available on the city's website. And some of the community visioning priorities that came out of that project were improved infrastructure, environmental preservation, improved transportation, and the value of parks, recreation, and open space. So these are themes that we're looking to build upon that were identified as part of that project. This is the existing vision statement that's in the currently adopted comprehensive plan. It talks about Sammamish as a bedroom community, well-preserved natural environment, very family-friendly, kid-safe culture, connected neighborhoods, peaceful neighborhoods, abundant tree canopy. I think a lot of the themes of this existing vision statement, I think, still hold true today. And it's just a question of how we update this to reflect changing priorities and maybe add some more detail on how it connects to the goals of the plan. As part of the community visioning project, a draft vision statement was also developed. It includes, again, many of the similar themes that are in the existing one, but does add additional detail on some topics such as housing, the natural environment, and transportation in particular. It also talks about being a resilient community with reliable utilities, sustainable city operations, and a culture of mutual support. So we've also given some thought to some potential other themes that maybe aren't captured in the existing or the draft vision statement. And these are things that we know are currently part of the city's planning program and topics that have come up in other conversations with the community related to other projects. So these are just some things to think about that could also be infused into the vision statement. So the city's undertaking an effort to create a climate action plan. And that is something that could be a potential theme for the updated vision statement. The town center continues to be a focal point in city planning documents and the development code. The notion of expanding transportation options and potentially additional transit connectivity. There's a potential for more specificity on housing affordability and specific types of housing, as well as who housing should be affordable to, such as those that are working in Sammamish. The notion of fiscal sustainability for the city itself and city operations, stronger connection to the goals around parks and recreation, both facilities and programming. We know that stormwater management, water quality, and fish habitat are an important topic for the community. Having many lakes in the community and fish habitat, we know that this has been an ongoing priority for the city. Building infrastructure to support development consistent with the plan. And then potentially adapting to changing conditions like increased work from home have the potential to be significant, have a significant impact on the city's planning program. And so I would ask everyone to think about, what are some of the big ideas that can help bridge the gap between today and what the community would like to see in 2044? And those are some of the questions we'll be asking you later this evening. So some more community visioning themes that came out of the community visioning project. There were some community kind of priority statements that were included in the report, and this is sort of a summary of them. So some of the priorities are to have a diverse, inclusive, safe, and walkable community, housing variety, choice, and affordability, being resilient, and having strong social networks, tight-knit character, services, cultural events, and retail amenities. Transportation options, including driving, biking, walking, and to take transit. And then the connection to the natural environment. So those are some of the themes that we'll be building on as part of this effort. Now I'd like to show just a couple of examples. Some of these are from our work at Framework, and one of the examples is from a different project that we were not a part of. So we've been working with the City of Airway Heights to update their comprehensive plan over the last year. And Airway Heights is a smaller community outside of Spokane, but recently has been the fastest growing community in Washington. And so this project was focused on expanding opportunities for new housing, residential development in the community because they've been so fast growing, and also working with the community to develop a new vision statement. And their existing vision statement, fairly similar to what Sammamish has today. It was a brief paragraph. And so we worked with the community and with the Planning Commission to develop a new vision statement that's represented in this graphic over here. So there's a brief statement that talks about some of the community values, but then it's represented in these different bubbles around specifically what we would be looking to do as part of the plan. And then related to the vision statement, we developed what we call the 10 big ideas. So this is sort of a list of what the community planning priorities are in a way that I think resonates strongly with the community, and I think represents some of those tangible elements I discussed earlier. So one of the big ideas is that they want to be a community where people can afford to live and work. And one of the things that we noticed from some of the data we looked at was that there's a high population of people that live in Airway Heights and work outside of the community, and also a high number of people that live outside of the community and work in Airway Heights. So one of the things that the community really values is being able to become a community where people can both live and to work. They want to be a walkable and bikeable community. They want to be a full service community with access to goods and services. They put a lot of effort into their downtown plan, and so that's a very high priority. They want to see that implemented. And so each of the big ideas here is listed, and then this crosswalk highlights which elements of the comprehensive plan those ideas are represented with policies and goals and actions. And so I won't read through all of them, but just to say that, this was carefully thought through with the community to represent their desires for the next 20 years.
Jeff, one of our attendees is asking if you could define a tight-knit character. What does that mean for the community?
Yeah, that is a good question. I will wait till the end of the presentation and then we'll get into the questions. So that'll be first on my list.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, and thank you for the question. We will definitely get to it here in just a couple minutes. This example was from a downtown plan we were working on for the city of Pasco, and we did develop a graphic kind of similar to what we showed in Airway Heights for their actual vision statement, but we also developed this map, which is called the vision map. And so it represents some key elements of the plan, like enhancing the downtown core, creating more activities and things for people to do, improving some of the streetscapes on the entries into downtown, improving some of the streets and public spaces, highlighting the historic district and all of the history in downtown Pasco. So there are some fun and creative ways to also be able to communicate a vision statement graphically. So this could be one of the options that we could look at for the comprehensive plan vision for Sammamish. And then this example is a project we did not work on, although I have done some work in Oklahoma City, and they've done really some fantastic planning there in the city. And so for their comprehensive plan update, rather than developing a typical vision statement, they just included what they called the big ideas. And they had some pretty nice branding, I think, for their comprehensive plan that talks about planning for a healthy future. Their comprehensive plan was really centered around improving public health in the community, and they've made a lot of transportation and parks investments in pursuit of those goals. So some of their big ideas was a transportation system that works for everyone. They have fairly recently developed light rail, increasing housing choice, facilitating health and wellness has been a big priority for them. Great places that attract people and catalyze development and innovation, safe, attractive, vibrant neighborhoods, fiscal sustainability, so something we touched on earlier, and then preserving the rural character and natural resources. And their whole plan has been oriented around these big ideas. And then for the comprehensive plan elements themselves, they develop these pictures and kind of branding for each element. So rather than call it the transportation element or the land use element, they came up with these names that kind of tie into the overall project brand, and I think make it quite compelling for the reader. So this is something that we can consider for Sammamish as well. So this summarizes our strategy for sort of moving from where we are today to developing a refined vision statement for the plan. So, and this is something that we presented to the Planning Commission and the City Council a month or two ago and got buy-in on. So first, which we're doing this evening, we want to build upon prior work and community input and continue to get community input. Seek feedback during the planning summit, which is tonight's event and the other events as well. We'll be headed back to the Planning Commission and City Council in early December for workshops with both boards, specifically on visioning. We'll look for ways to communicate the vision statement graphically and connect them to the plan elements. There may be some refining once we get to a preferred alternative. And then ultimately it'll result in a resolution adopted by the City Council, ideally in January of next year, that will include that refined vision statement. So that's the end of the presentation. I just want to note that we do have a project website for those that have not seen it. You can sign up on there to receive updates and to sign up for register for any of the other Planning Summit events. We have gotten emails from a few people who, for whatever reason, have had some errors when they've been trying to register for the events. If that becomes an issue, just feel free to email us and we'll take care of it for you. But would suggest monitoring the project website, as that'll have the most relevant and up-to-date information on the project. We do have a blog page that we'll be continually updating. It's called Project Updates, so look for that. We'll be making updates here pretty soon. We do have social media accounts with the city that we'll be posting information on, so look for the city on Facebook and on Instagram. And then if you have questions or comments, we do have 2 email addresses that are tied to the website that are frequently monitored. Also Evan's contact information, and as well as my email at Framework. So if you have questions or comments, don't hesitate to reach out to us if there's anything we can do to help you. So just wanted to say thank you for participating this evening, and we're going to now move into the live polling. And before we do that, I can answer that one question for you. So while I'm answering that question, for those of you that maybe joined late or haven't had a chance, please go to slido.com on your phone, mobile device, like an iPad or your computer, and enter in that code, and you'll have access to be able to respond to the polling questions. So the question was, define tight-knit character. What does that mean? Well, I would first say that that is not a term that I developed or that we developed, so we'll have to kind of interpret. I would interpret tight-knit character to mean that there's a commonality among it, that the character is similar amongst different neighborhoods. But with that said, others may have a different take on exactly what that means. Okay. So now I'm going to switch my screen and we can get into the polling, and then we can get into some additional comments and questions. Okay. So now you should see the Slido screen again. There's the code for you to join, or you can also use the QR code, which will send you right to the website. And we're going to go through a series of poll questions. There's a couple of questions that are word clouds. So as you respond to the question, there'll be a word cloud that will form on the screen, and it will change as more responses are input into it. And then we have some that are open text, and those responses will just scroll down the screen and show up as speech bubbles. So the first question, we'll go to, my favorite thing about Sammamish is, and try to focus on one thing. I know there's likely many things that you like about Sammamish, but if you had to pick one. So the larger and darker colors in the green indicate the responses that were inputted the most number of times. Okay, we'll just give another 30 seconds or so. Looks like a few people are still responding. So no surprise, a lot of people's favorite things are connections to nature and natural features, parks, open spaces, trees, wildlife. These are themes that we continually hear in public outreach in the city. All right. It looks like everyone has had a chance to put their answer in. And again, these will be summarized in an engagement report following the meeting and shared on our website. We are going to go to poll number 2. Blank is a city I like that could serve as a model for Sammamish in the future. So if you have a city in the region, some other part of the country, other part of the world, what should Sammamish aspire to, so to speak? And what cities might we look at? Again, not to mean that it's, we're going to copy everything about it, but, if you had to think of a city that you think is attractive and offers something for Sammamish, please input it into the poll. This is always a fun one. We've also done exercises where we have people upload photos of their favorite cities that could serve as inspiration. It's another fun one maybe we could do later in the process. give it just another 30 seconds or so. This is really interesting to see all the variety of cities that people have input. It's nice to see my original hometown, Burlington, Vermont, get mentioned there. We actually have on our team for this project the former planning director of Burlington, who's now doing consulting. They'll be here for our mixed use summit happening next week. Okay, thanks. That's a great list. Really interesting to see the variety of locations. Some of them not surprising, particularly the ones, locally that were mentioned, but definitely a really good variety here. So creative thinking, and appreciate all those responses. Okay, third question. List or describe one thing that should not be in Sammamish's vision. So if there's something that we want to avoid in the future, what might that be? And this is just an open text response, not the word cloud. All right, we'll give it another 30 seconds. Say most of the comments seem to be related to housing, transportation, habitat and natural features. Yeah, big box stores. Okay. Oop, looks like there's one other response coming in. Okay. Thank you for those responses. We are going to move on to the fourth poll. There, I think, are two more left. All right, looks like we got them all in. Okay, so this is when I close my eyes and see Sammamish in 2044, I see. So this would be, what you would want to see. This would be positive. This would reflect what your ideal future would be. So it looks like some of the themes are walkability. There's some mentions of the town center, affordability, performing arts center, interesting idea, wildlife corridors, outdoor amphitheater, similar to the performing arts center. Broadband, that's come up a few times in the previous meeting. Public transit mentioned, social activities. Senior center. More local jobs. Okay, we'll give it 30 more seconds. I see there's still some participants typing in responses. Okay, we are going to move on to the last poll. So final one, this is just have the text bubbles. In one sentence, please describe your vision for Sammamish. Okay, we'll give it another minute or so. Some very thoughtful responses, so I appreciate it. Okay, we'll just wait for this one last response and then we'll move on. Okay. One more coming in. Okay, great. Thank you for that. Again, very thoughtful responses. I appreciate everyone's effort and creative thinking on that. Again, we'll pull together a summary and try to pull out some of the key themes. I think it's always interesting to do these exercises. I think what stood out to me is there's a lot of overlap in terms of what people value, but also definitely some divergent opinions around specific topics. So both of those are, things that we'll explore as we move through the process. So now what I'd like to do is move into some Q&A, or if folks have comments, we'd be happy to take comments as well. So again, feel free to put a question in the chat on the webinar. You can also ask them through the Slido app itself. And then for those that are interested, also feel free to raise your hand. We'd be happy to unmute you and allow you to make a comment or ask a question. Okay, I don't see any questions in the Q&A on Slido. So let me stop sharing my screen. Let's see if we have any questions in the chat. Not seeing any questions in the chat. Okay. Roberto, you have your hand up first. I am going to unmute you and give you the floor. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. I was just wondering, as you seek input from people, how can you make sure that the input is coming from residents of Sammamish, as opposed to people who may have an interest in Sammamish but do not necessarily live in the Sammamish community?
Yeah, good question. There is some outreach that the city has done that is specific to residents in Sammamish. I believe the community visioning survey and the statistically valid housing survey that was done were focused on residents. We'll be doing some focus groups as well, where we'll be recording, who attended those, and there'll definitely be a strong representation from residents. With that said, though, there is other entities that we do want to engage with. So people that work in Sammamish may not live in Sammamish, representatives from different community organizations and other public agencies like the schools, likely have staff and people that we'll be interacting with that do not live in Sammamish. For other projects like the development code updates, we had a diverse committee that we worked with that included folks from the building community, professionals that have been involved in design and permitting, and some of those representatives do not live in Sammamish. So I couldn't say that we won't be doing some outreach that will involve people that do not live in Sammamish, but absolutely there will be an emphasis on hearing from the residents through this process.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Okay, Mr. Eric Johnson had his hand up. I am going to give you the floor, and go ahead, please, sir.
Okay. One, it's hard to write in the chat because it's still disabled. At least it's showing for mine as chat disabled. One of the things that we have experienced here, as the last weekend demonstrated, your notes early on in your vision statement talked about reliable utilities. And that's one thing we don't have with PSE in this area. And how do you frame that in the vision statement to actually have an electric company supporting us so that we're not out of power for 25 to 45 hours 4 times a year?
Excuse me. Yeah, good question. We will be engaging with Puget Sound Energy as part of this project. And there are some other utility providers that are not within the jurisdiction of the city that we'll also be working with. It certainly could be something that's reflected in the vision statement, or perhaps in one of the big ideas if we go in that direction. And then the other opportunity to address it would be in the goals and policies and other parts of the capital facilities element, which would address that. So those are kind of the main pieces, but I think, working collaboratively with PSE to find a way to address the issues that you just raised, I think is going to be our best path. Understanding that, it is a separate organization, and we'll just have to kind of work collaboratively with them and communicate the interests of the city and the residents to them. Thank you for the question. And I am seeing some posts in the chat, so I'm not sure if that was an issue specific to you, but I do see two questions that have come in, including one that just came in that said, will you share a list of people who have been participating in these meetings? And the answer to that is yes, those will be a matter of public record. We have the registrations for this event and sign-in sheets from the event the other evening. Chat is disabled. Let me see here. Apologize for that. The Q&A function is working. I will check on the chat to make sure that that's working for the next time. But if you instead go to the button that says Q&A, you can ask questions through that. Apologies. Yeah. Question, how does the vision guide or work with the comp plan goals and policies? So yeah, good question. So the vision is a little bit higher level, and it kind of provides the overarching direction of the plan. And then the comp plan goals and policies would then add additional specificity and detail by topic, right? So for example, the goals and policies in the housing element would, flush out perhaps a concept around housing that is mentioned in the vision statement. So it essentially furthers the intent of the vision statement within those goals and policy statements that occur within each of the specific elements. Good question. Okay, another question. Seems like the 2024 comp plan has much wider reach of key elements and topics, plus how to implement them versus just a vision statement. Yeah, I mean, I think there is definitely an opportunity, and this is something that, we do in all of the type of planning work that we do, which includes comprehensive planning, but is to really go beyond just goals and policies, which are certainly important for city decision making, but to actually add, more detail on strategies and actions to realize the vision. So I absolutely do see that as a potential opportunity with this update, is to provide more information and guidance to the city to implement the comprehensive plan. And I think a lot of cities are sort of moving more in that direction, with more of a greater emphasis on implementation, right? Because the comp plan does address so many different topics and so many different considerations, it sometimes can be difficult to bring the focus that is needed for implementation, but I certainly do see that as a major opportunity with this update. Okay, have you helped other cities work through the clear competing interests to help the council write a vision statement, environment versus development? Yes, I have. And I think one of the best ways that we can do that is to not actually gloss over those differences. I think there can be a tendency where there are strong differences of opinion to kind of come up with something that's kind of a watered down version of both. And I think there's a greater opportunity to really, through the public process, not really gloss over those differences, but actually work through them through dialogue. And I think what we found is there's often more agreement than less agreement. And I think if we can kind of emphasize, as we saw in the polling exercises, there's clearly a lot of agreement. And so I think to really set aside the issues where there is disagreement and kind of work through those, I think that's what's been successful in our experience. And I think we also found that in the most recent development regulations project where we were working with residents that had strong opinions on, preservation of natural features in the environment. And we were working also with the building community. And I think through the public process that the city laid out, we're able to come to relative agreement on a path forward that sort of balanced issues of preserving environmental features, housing affordability, quality development, transportation, connectivity, and things like that. So I think the only way that you can work through those differences is through the public process. And I think, trying to gloss over them is not going to be a workable solution. Really, really good question. Okay, next one. There's been discussion of having the comprehensive plan map designations be broader than individual zoning by property. How do you see those relating to each other? Yeah, so Sammamish, like many communities, has a future land use map, which occurs in the land use element, and a zoning map that are essentially exactly the same. And so there's an opportunity through this update to create broader categories of land use that would give more flexibility in the different zoning districts that could be applied to those land use designations. So for example, you might have a category that's, medium residential, and there might be 2 or 3 zoning districts that fall into that category. And so if the city and the community wanted to make a zoning change, it wouldn't necessarily always require a change to the land use map. It would allow the city and the community to be a little bit more nimble in how that works. And so that is an opportunity, I think something that we are going to explore as part of this process and create a little bit more differentiation between those 2 tools, which are the land use map and the zoning map. Comment in the vision, could you please include more places for youth to come together in safe environments that promote community? Absolutely, be happy to include that. That does seem like something we've heard about several times. How does that relate to the vision statement? I'm not sure. If you could provide a little more detail on that. Oh, the zoning maps. Yeah, so I mean, the zoning map or the land use map is simply one tool for how the vision statement gets implemented. And the land use element and the land use map really form the foundation for the comprehensive plan, and all of the other elements kind of feed into it. So for example, depending on the land uses and types of development that are anticipated in the land use map, you then need infrastructure and transportation networks and parks and schools to be able to serve that. So all of the other elements kind of feed into it. And the zoning map is, and the land use map are 2 ways of kind of implementing the vision. So for example, if there was a push on having, more variety in housing, different types of housing, that would be something that would be implemented through the land use plan and ultimately the zoning maps. So that's just kind of one example. Yeah, good question. So next one, what is the process to connect the 2044 comprehensive plan into actual items for the city council? Or is it just something that has a fuzzy future with no implementation? It's a really good question. And I think, there certainly have been lots of comprehensive plans done in different cities, that haven't seen a lot of implementation. And I think the opportunity here is to provide, more of a roadmap and information to do that. I would also say there's other elements of the city's planning program and budgeting that do kind of feed out of the comp plan. So I think one of the things that we would do in the near term would be to make any updates to the zoning and development regulations that would help implement the plan. So if there are specific policies and actions that come out of the plan that are related to land use and zoning, those would move forward in a relatively, I think, short time frame. Other things like capital facility plans, those get updated generally every year. And in particular, the 6-year plan for both transportation and capital facilities has to have a detailed budget, and the city has to be able to show that there's adequate funding to be able to implement it. There's also additional studies that could potentially come out of the comp plan. So for example, if being a walkable city, which was one of the things mentioned in the live polling exercise, there might be an action that comes out of the comp plan to do a specific bike and pedestrian master plan or something like that. You know, or I mean, the city's already working on a climate action plan, but that's another example of something that might come out of comprehensive plan priorities, which would be to specifically, you know, develop a climate action plan or another type of specific plan that kind of goes beyond the detail of the comprehensive plan. So there are different ways that things can get implemented, but I think there's an opportunity to really spell that out and the priorities. And I think this is something that we could come back to the community later on and say, hey, here's the, you know, policies and goals of the plan and the actions that we're thinking about. What do you think should be the highest priority? And that can help us kind of refine that before it gets adopted. So yeah, definitely think implementation is really going to be a key part of this discussion. Is there a way to enter Q&A on Zoom and also Q&A on Slido? Yes, you can use either. I'm going to check the Q&A on Slido.
I'm
It looks
tracking
like-
it, Jeff, so you're good.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it looks like we picked up those comments. Thank you to Mary for putting those in the Q&A chat. Okay, looks like we have, okay, let's see. We'll also have youth focus groups to get direct feedback from young people to hear about their aspirations for the city. Absolutely, that is something that's part of our public participation plan and something we're looking forward to doing. And fortunately, the city has a really great track record of doing outreach in the schools. The community visioning report has some really excellent examples and summaries of youth input that was done through the schools. So we hope to, you know, definitely build upon that. Yeah, another great question. Is there a report card on accomplishments in the previous comp plan? So the phase that we are in right now is we are doing an audit of the existing plan. And that comes in a couple of forms. One is we're doing what's called a periodic update checklist, which is something that the state puts out. And we have to go through and basically show how the existing plan meets all of the sort of state legislative requirements. And we're close to finishing that up, should be completed in draft form this week. And we'll be presenting that to the Planning Commission on November 17th. The other is sort of a more broader audit of the comp plan as part of the existing conditions report, which would look at more like things like best practices and also could include, as suggested here, a report card on accomplishments of the previous comp plan. So I think that is definitely something we plan to document and identify any gaps and then think about, you know, different ways that we could implement the new comp plan once it's adopted. Another great question. Okay. Not seeing any more questions in the Q&A. No hands up. So we'll just take any final questions or comments you may have, and otherwise we can wrap up. Looks like we got one more question. Is there anything missing from the vision and or current comp plan that is essential to put in either or both? Well, there's definitely been some new legislation that's passed recently that wouldn't be reflected in the current comp plan. So if you were at the event last week, we provided just a very high level summary of what some of those that recent legislation is. Much of it is about housing, but some of it is also around reporting and compliance. So those are the types of things that will be addressed in the checklist. And then beyond that, I mean, I think the comp plan that the city has is, generally compliant with all of the requirements. I think it's more a question of what can we do to improve the plan, including the vision and the comp plan itself, to kind of better align with community priorities and support implementation. So is there anything missing? I mean, I think we also highlighted earlier in the presentation some themes that, you know, from doing outreach in the community, we think people have mentioned and seem to be important that I think could be reflected, you know, better in the plan. But in general, I think, you know, the current comp plan kind of checks the boxes, at least in terms of what the major requirements are. Good question. Has PSRC changed their approval parameters from the previous comp plan procedure? That's a good question. I'm not familiar with all of the specifics. I believe they did just release some new guidance on it. My understanding is that it will be relatively the same as in previous efforts, except they obviously have a new 2050 plan and multi-county planning policies that we'll have to comply with. I think the bigger changes potentially are happening with King County, where they're considering a certification process along with the affordable housing target, which is yet to be determined. So that's something that we're continuing to track, but that would basically require another layer of approval. And then, you know, the Washington Department of Commerce doesn't necessarily approve the plan, but they do have an opportunity to review and provide comment. So we'd be happy to take a closer look and see if there's anything that we've uncovered that's significantly different than the last time. But my understanding is it's fairly similar. Other than the focus groups, how can I more actively participate in the planning visioning activities? Yeah, good question. So the focus groups are certainly a good way to participate. I think the other kind of major way that you can participate is by tracking and participating with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is going to be kind of our regular public forum to have these conversations, to be able to share work products as we produce them, get their feedback, allow for input from the community. Some of those could be structured more like workshops, and they also provide opportunities to attend virtually or in person. So those are going to be good opportunities as well. You can always submit, you know, written comments through us through the contact information that we provided. We are going to be doing some pop-up outreach events in 2023, and we'll be providing information on the website for how to participate in those. As we get more towards the draft plan stage, we will have an open house that will provide an opportunity, and then there'll be the sort of formal legislative process where there'll be opportunities for comments at public hearings and at public meetings with the Planning Commission and the City Council. Comment, I refer to PSRC considering housing targets as minimums only. I'll have to look into that. I mean, my understanding, yes, is the housing targets are minimums, and now there's added layers of reporting that will have to be provided, and potentially changes that would have to be undertaken if the assumptions used in the comp plan are not being achieved. And then again, the potential new requirements with the county, including an additional affordable housing target. So yeah, I mean, I do think the trend is sort of moving away from, you know, do you have the capacity, to how are things actually unfolding, and does the city need to consider any changes to their regulatory structure and planning policies? Comment, Planning Commission also allows 3-minute non-agenda public comment to beginning of their meetings, and then 7 minutes for agenda related public comment for each meeting. Plus anyone can email inputs, written photos, drawings, and other things. So thank you, Mary, for that. There are always opportunities at Planning Commission meetings for comments, both on agenda and non-agenda topics. See, looks like Mr. Stickney would like to make a comment. And I'm going to unmute you and give you the floor.
Hello, Jeff. Appreciate the opportunity. On the questions on, growth targets, Vision 2040 from PSRC did state, I've got these up on the computer screen, a growth target is the minimum number of residents or housing units in a jurisdiction expected to accommodate by a certain future year. Pretty radical shift in Vision 2050. PSRC is looking for substantial consistency with the plan's land use growth assumptions with adopted countywide growth. I've talked to PSRC and King County, and they can't stop someone from going over, but they're strongly encouraging jurisdictions to be in substantial consistency with the plan. So there is a pretty major fundamental shift. And from my last comment is from a regional, policy perspective, they are no longer minimums.
Right, but I still think the primary way that that's going to unfold is how is development actually occurring based on the assumptions in the capacity analysis, right? So if we assume, just to take a non-specific to Sammamish example, that in some zone within a city, we're going to see development at 5 units an acre, and it's coming in at 1 or 2. And so that capacity is not being developed consistent with the assumptions to achieve the targets, then absolutely we're going to have issues. And the way that that's going to play out is the new legislation that requires a report from the city after 5 years that sort of documents that. So, I think, again, if the capacity study or the buildable lands report shows that there's capacity, I think you're okay in terms of getting the plan adopted. But where it's going to become an issue is if it's not developing based on those assumptions. So it's not, I think, okay to just say, well, we have enough capacity and here's how things played out. There's going to be much more accountability across all of cities to make sure that things are happening consistent with the assumptions that are in the plan. So I do agree with you. It's definitely something that we need to be mindful of. And I think the other thing that we want to do is be able to set up the city for success and being able to document that so that we understand if there's any potential issues, before the 5-year mark and when we have to produce that report, so that we'll be well prepared for anything that may come up. Thank you, Mr. Stickney. Any other comments? Sammamish is in the towns and cities category. Are we visioning for 2050 with a comp plan that will be reviewed in 10 years? Yes, Sammamish is in the cities and towns category. We're visioning for a 20-year plan for 2044, and yes, it will have to undergo a periodic update in 10 years. In which case, there'll be another round of buildable lands and growth targets, and essentially a similar process as we're undergoing now. Good question. Okay. Looks like there's a couple comments in Slido. Is there a way that residents can get better access to Lake Sammamish? Currently, there is only one small park. That is something that could be looked at as part of the shoreline element, or as the parks and recreation element. There are ways for cities to acquire land for access, but it often, particularly for lakefront access or any sort of waterfront access, can be challenging because it's often quite expensive. And there may be limited opportunities if it's mostly in residential use, but certainly something we could take a look at. Regarding utilities, besides PSE, we should consider enhanced internet reliability as well. Certainly, I mean, that's something that's come up in some of the outreach we've been doing, and certainly with perhaps more people working from home. That's certainly a really important issue and something we'd look at through the utilities element. Okay. All right, last call for questions. Okay, well, I think we can wrap up for the evening. I just want to say again how much I appreciate everyone taking time out of their evening to attend tonight and provide some really great input and some great questions. This project really cannot be a success unless we have engagement from the community. So it's really, critical. As I summarized tonight, there'll be other opportunities for engagement. There's 3 more planning summit events, one on later this week on housing, and then next week on transportation and mixed use centers. So I encourage you to attend those. Please keep an eye on the project website. We'll have summaries of these events and a list of future opportunities for input. And again, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and thoughtfulness, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.